We begin Artaxerxes, from Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Hugh Clough. The first Artaxerxes among all the kings of Persia, the most remarkable for a gentle and noble spirit, was surnamed the Long-handed, his right hand being longer than his left, and was the son of Xerxes the second, whose story I am now writing, who had the surname of the Mindful, was the grandson of the former by his daughter Artaxerxes, who brought Darius, or something like that, 4 sons. Eldest Artaxerxes, the next Cyrus, Kuresh, and 2 younger than these, Ostanus and Artaxerxes. Cyrus took his name of the ancient Cyrus, as they say, had his name from the sun, which in the Persian language is called Cyrus. So Kuresh is the sun. Artaxerxes was at first called Artaxerxes. Dryden says, Arses, but it is utterly improbable that Ctesias, however otherwise he may have filled his books with a perfect farrago of incredible and senseless fables, should be ignorant of the name of the king with whom he lived as his physician, attending upon himself, his wife, his mother, and his children. Cyrus, from his earliest youth, shows something of a headstrong and vehement character. Artaxerxes, on the other side, was gentler in everything, and of a nature more yielding and soft in its actions. He married a beautiful and virtuous wife, at the desire of his parents, but kept her as expressly against their wishes, for King Darius, having put her brother to death, was proposing likewise to destroy her, but Artaxerxes, throwing himself at his mother's feet, by many tears, at last, with much ado, persuaded her that they should neither put her to death nor divorce her from him. However, Cyrus was his mother's favorite, and the son whom she most desired to settle in the throne, and therefore his father, Darius, now lying ill, he, being sent for from the sea to the court, sent out thence, with full hopes that by her means he was to be declared the successor of the kingdom, for Artaxerxes had the specious plea on his behalf, which Xerxes, on the advice of Demaratus, had of old made use of, that she had borne him, Artaxerxes, when he was a subject of Cyrus, when a king notwithstanding. She revealed not with Darius, but the eldest son, Artaxerxes, was proclaimed king, his name being changed into Artaxerxes, and Cyrus remained satrap of Lydia, and commander in the maritime provinces. It was not long after the decease of Darius that the king, his successor, went to Pasargada to have the ceremony of his inauguration consummated by the Persian priests. There is a temple dedicated to a warlike female entity, whom one might liken to Minerva, into which, when the royal person to be initiated has passed, he must strip himself of his own robe and put on that which Cyrus the First wore before he was king. Then, having devoured a frail of figs, he must eat turpentine and drink a cup of sour milk, to which, if they superadd any other rites, it is unknown to any but those that are present at them. Now Artaxerxes, being about to address himself to this solemnity, Tissaphernes came to him, bringing a certain priest, who, having trained up Cyrus in his youth in the established discipline of Persia, and having taught him the Magian philosophy, was likely to be as much disappointed as any man that his people did not succeed to the throne. And the thing about initiations is it's unless it's like a scripture for everybody or something like this that you're being taught, or you're just working through some basic thing, it's not something to talk about to except to those who've already had the such and such initiation. And Magian, actually not quite the same as Mazdayastian Zarathustrian, although it's labeled as that, is the conservative tradition, you could say, is not quite the same thing. Just like Christianity is not quite the same thing as the path of Jesus, or Judaism, the path of the other prophets, and that can be established. But and for that reason, his veracity was the less questioned when he charged Cyrus as though he had been about to lie in wait for the king in the temple, and to assault and assassinate him as he was putting off his garment. Some affirm that he was apprehended upon this impeachment, others that he had entered the temple and was pointed out there as he lay lurking by the priest. But as he was on the point of being put to death, his mother clasped him in their arms, and entwining him with the tresses of her hair, joined his neck close to her own, and by her bitter lamentation and intercession to Artaxerxes for him, succeeded in saving his life, and sent him away again to the sea and to his former province. This, however, could no longer content him, nor did he so well remember his delivery as his arrest, his resentment for which made him more eagerly desirous of the kingdom than before. Some say that he revolted from his brother because he had not a revenue allowed him sufficient for his daily meals. But this is on the face of it absurd, for had he had nothing else, yet he had a mother ready to supply him with whatever he could desire out of her own means. But the greatest number of soldiers who were hired from all quarters and maintained, as Xenophon informs us, for his service by his friends and connections, is in itself a sufficient proof of his riches. He did not assemble them together in a body, desiring as yet to conceal his enterprise, but he had agents everywhere, enlisting foreign soldiers upon various pretenses, and in the meantime Praesetes, who was with the king, did her best to put aside all suspicions, and Crus himself always wrote in a humble and dutiful manner to him, sometimes soliciting favor, and sometimes making countercharges against Tissaphernes, as if his jealousy and contest had been wholly with him. Moreover, there was a certain natural dilatoriness in the king, which was taken by many for clemency. And indeed, in the beginning of his reign, he did seem really to emulate the gentleness of the first Artaxerxes, being very accessible in his person, and very liberal to a fault in the distribution of honors and favors, even in his punishments. No contumely or vindictive pleasure could be seen, and those who offered him presents were as much pleased with his manner of accepting as were in giving them. Nor truly was there anything, however, inconsiderable given him, in which 1. Amisus had presented him with a very large pomegranate. By Mithras, said he, this man, were he entrusted with it, would turn a small city into a great one. Now, Magog, I don't know if this happened yet as I'm saying this, but Magog is not a people who practice Mithraism. So that's one of the differences we're seeing, is that there's rumbling the tumbling here. So that's how we know that, you know, it wasn't to be under the USSR. But Mithraism wasn't a religion at the time when those books in the Bible were written, so it's to be a different religion. And this is a religion that propped up is this intercessory hero deity thing being passed amongst them. Once when some were offering to him one thing, some another as he was on a progress, a certain poor laborer, having got nothing at hand to bring him, ran to the riverside, and taking up water in his hands, offered it to him, with which Artaxerxes was so well pleased that he sent him a goblet of gold and 1,000 daryaks. I mean this because this is sort of the origin, the Indo-Aryan spreading into the Hyperborean. To Euclides, the Lacedaemonian, who made a number of bold and arrogant speeches to him, he sent word by one of his officers, "You have leave to say what you please to me, and I, you should remember, may both say and do what I please to you." Teribazus once, when they were hunting, came up and pointed out to the king that his royal robe was torn. The king asked him what he wished to do, and when Teribazus replied, "May it please you to put on another, and give me that," the king did so, saying withal, "I give it you, Teribazus, but I charge you not to wear it." He, little regarding the injunction, being not a bad, but a light-headed, thoughtless man, immediately the king took it off, put it on, and bedecked himself further with royal golden necklaces and women's ornaments, to the great scandal of everybody, the thing being quite unlawful. But the king laughed and told him, "You have my leave to wear the trinkets as a woman and the robe of state as a fool." And whereas none usually sat down to eat with the king besides his mother and his wedded wife, the former being placed above, the other below him, Artaxerxes invited also to his table his 2 younger brothers, Astanus and Artaxerxes. But what was the most popular thing of all among the Persians was the sight of his wife Statira's chariot, which always appeared with its curtains down, allowing her countrywomen to salute and approach her, which made the queen a great favorite with the people. Now, the lifting up of the mothers, you could say, when monotheism, actual monotheism, I don't mean, like this angel worship cults that are attributed as Zoroastrian. I mean, the monotheism origins of that group are included the same mentions you find in Muhammad, that paradise at the feet of the mother and that sort of thing. So this thing of exalting the female finds its role and even acted out in physical ways of elevation. Yet busy fictitious men that delighted in change professed it to be their opinion that the times needed Cyrus, a man of great spirit, an excellent warrior and a lover of his friends, and that the largeness of their empire absolutely required a bold and enterprising prince. Cyrus then, not only relying upon those of his own province near the sea, but upon many of those in the upper countries near the king, commenced the war against him. He wrote to the Lacedaemonians, bidding them come to his assistance and supply him with men, assuring them that to those who came to him on foot he would give horses, and to the horsemen chariots, that upon those who had farms he would bestow villages, and those who were lords of villages he would make so of cities, and those that would be of his soldiers should receive their pay, not by count, but by weight. And among many other high praises of himself, he said he had the stronger soul, was more of a philosopher and a better Magian, and could drink, and better, more wine than his brother, who, as he averred, was such a coward, and so little like a man, that he could neither sit his horse in hunting, nor his throne in time of danger. The Lacedaemonians, his letter being read, sent a staff to Clearchus, commanding him to obey Cyrus in all things. So Cyrus marched towards the king, having under his conduct a numerous host of barbarians, but little less than 13,000 stipendiary Grecians, alleging first one cause, then another for his expedition. Yet the true reason lay not long concealed, but Tissaphernes went to the king in person to declare it. Thereupon the court was all in an uproar and tumult, the queen mother bearing almost the whole blame of the enterprise, and her retainers being suspected and accused. Above all, Statira angered her by bewailing the war and passionately demanding where were now the pledges and the intercession which saved the life of him that conspired against his brother. To the end, she said, that he might plunge us all into war and trouble, for which words Paracetes, hating Starira, and being naturally implacable and savage in her anger and revenge, consulted how she might destroy her. But since Dryden tells us that her purpose took effect in the time of the war, and Ctesias says it was after it, I shall keep the story for the place to which the latter assigns it, as it is very unlikely that he who was actually present should know the time when it happened, and there was no motive to induce him designedly to misplace its date in his narration of it, though it is not infrequent with him in his history to make excursions from truth into mere fiction and romance. While some people, the dates are not so much an important issue. Today is it's a Friday, and the Muslim they read a chapter that one of its lessons is that, hey, it's not about the number. In fact, we're just going to tell you that there's a dispute over the number. And some people actually know, but it's not about the number, people, As Cyrus was upon the march, rumors and reports were brought him, as though the king still deliberated, and were not mindful to fight, and presently to join battle with him, but wait in the heart of his kingdom, until his forces should have come in thither from all parts of his dominions. He had cut a trench through the plain 10 fathoms in breadth, and as many in depth, the length of it being no less than 400 furlongs. Yet he allowed Cyrus to pass across it, and to advance almost to the city Babylon. And then Teribazus, as the report goes, when the first that had the boldness to tell the king that he ought not to avoid the conflict, nor to abandon Media, Babylon, and even Susa, and hide himself in Persis, when all the while he had an army many times over more numerous than his enemies, and an infinite company of governors and captains who were better soldiers and politicians than Cyrus. So last he resolved to fight as soon as it was possible for him, making therefore his first appearance all on a sudden. At the head of 900,000 well-marshaled men, he so startled and surprised the enemy, who, with the confidence of contempt, were marching on their way in no order and with their arms not ready for use, that Cyrus, in the midst of such noise and tumult, was scarcely able to form them for battle.